CD Projekt Red just gave us one of the most interesting updates in years, and it came straight from their latest earnings call. They revealed where their teams are focused, how much money they're spending, and what the future looks like for The Witcher 4 and beyond. And on top of that, there's been fresh discussion about Unreal Engine 5. A lot of players are nervous about whether it can actually deliver smooth, optimized experiences, and the truth is, it's complicated. But what CDPR is doing with Unreal and why they're doing it actually tells us a lot about what we can expect. So, I've collected all of the most interesting tidbits as far as I have been able to find, and I'm going to share them with you now so that we can talk about Witcher stuff. Now, some of the stuff that they talked about was more interesting than others. For example, they talked about Cyberpunk releasing on the Switch 2 back in June, and they discussed the split of physical versus digital. Apparently, only 25% of copies of Cyberpunk 2077 on the Switch 2 were digital. That's unusual in 2025. Where digital sales dominate, but it also meant CDPR had thinner margins since they needed higher capacity cartridges. They never revealed the exact sales numbers, which probably means it wasn't massive, but still, Cyberpunk on a handheld is a milestone worth noting. The game also released for Apple Silicon in July. Now, realistically, not many people are booting up Cyberpunk on a MacBook Pro, but the fact it's there shows CDPR is still milking every possible platform. These aren't game-changing moves, but they keep the brand alive while the studio shifts its full attention toward future projects. Here's where things get serious. The Witcher 4, which is Projekt Polaris, originally announced in 2022, has entered full production in October of last year, and since then, they've just continued revving up the number of people working on it, and at this point, it's actually gotten to a pretty significant level. Back in April, 422 developers were assigned to it. That number is now up to 444. To put that in perspective, that's more than double what Witcher 3 ever had at its peak. Meanwhile, the Cyberpunk sequel has grown from 96 to 116 developers. Add in Project Sirius, Project Hadar, and support teams, and CDPR's total development headcount is just under 800 people. That's enormous growth for a studio that, not long ago, was seen as mid-size compared to giants like Ubisoft. This matters because it shows CDPR isn't treating Witcher 4 as just another sequel. They're building it like a flagship title with resources to match. Now, one of the interesting little tidbits that I've noticed over the last couple of years, specifically from industry analysts looking at CDPR, is that there has been a shift in expectation from investors as it pertains to spending, because now investors and analysts are not as worried about expenditures as it relates to engine optimization or R&D and things like that. And it used to be a pretty significant chunk of spending for the company, but now all of that has pretty much been funneled outward to Epic Games because they've partnered on Unreal Engine 5. So now CDPR's books are pretty much just filled with expenses as it relates to game development. And all of that crap for like managing an engine is now Epic's problem. And the problem of like other corporate partners they have, like Nvidia for ray tracing stuff within Cyberpunk, or like I'm sure that Nintendo helped optimize Cyberpunk for the Switch 2 and things like that. So I think it's really interesting to see that the shift towards Unreal Engine was not just a matter of pragmatism being practical, like, hey, we can hire people right out of school that know how to use the tools because everybody gets trained on Unreal Engine. That's a part of it, you know, certainly a component, or like the idea that Unreal Engine, it's popular, people know about it, investors, retail investors know about it, so that can help too. But it's also just on a very practical level, game development is so weird because it's art and it's engineering. It's not just like build a bridge that's functional. It has to be pretty. It has to be thought-provoking. Sometimes it has to be emotional. And what has historically happened is that CDPR would be making their Red engine, so they're basically a software company, like a software engineering company, making a game engine. And then they also have this other side of the company that's trying to make a work of art and a compelling story and interesting gameplay mechanics. And it's a totally different thing, but they have to work in tandem at the same time. And that's really expensive and really freaking complicated. And sometimes they don't line up too well, and it can just be more trouble than it may be worth, as we saw with like Cyberpunk, where things just got out of hand. And so their strategic partnership with Epic Games has been aimed not just to alleviate pressure on the company itself, in terms of development so that they can just be a game studio instead of like a software engineering studio, as it's also because investors love the idea of less complexity within the business, because now they don't have to invest based on the hope that CDPR has a properly maintained and optimized engine. They don't have to worry about that when they analyze CDPR as a business. They just have to look at the games. They just have to look at what they're presenting in that field. And investors, the number one thing investors hate is uncertainty. And a great way to increase uncertainty in general is by introducing more complexity to your operation. And in this case, they've simplified their operations significantly with this partnership, and I think that's a big component of it. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this Unreal Engine 5 partnership that they've got, and I want to go back to that demo that they released a couple months back. You might remember the Unreal Engine 5.6 tech demo CDPR helped present earlier this year. It wasn't actual Witcher 4 gameplay, but it gave us a glimpse at the tools they're using and the visual quality they're targeting. Yes, some of it was clearly for show, like the sequence where an NPC drops apples, a kid picks one up, and pigs rush in to eat them. Fun detail, but don't expect that level of systemic interaction everywhere in the final game. Still, the point of the demo was to communicate ambition. This is the kind of living, breathing world they're aiming for. And more importantly, CDPR wasn't just in the audience, they were on stage. Epic held them up as the face of Unreal 5. That means Witcher 4 isn't just another Unreal game, it's a showcase title for the engine itself. Here's where the concern comes in. Unreal Engine 5 games have had a rocky record lately. Metal Gear Solid Delta struggled to hit stable frame rates even on PlayStation 5 Pro. Star Wars Jedi, Survivor launched with brutal performance issues, and Monster Hunter Wilds sold millions despite being poorly optimized. This raises the question, is Unreal 5 inherently flawed, or are studios simply rushing games out without proper optimization? Honestly, it's probably both. Unreal is powerful, but it's also heavy. Too many publishers stop at good enough performance because financially, it's easier to launch and patch later than to delay. And that's why some people fear Witcher 4 could launch as a stutterfest. But I think this time it will be different. First, CDPR is building Witcher 4 with consoles in mind, specifically PlayStation 5. Cyberpunk was built for PC first, and scaling it down to PS4 and Xbox One was a disaster. They don't want to repeat that mistake. Second, they've publicly committed to 60 FPS as the standard. That's ambitious, but it sets the right expectation. And third, Epic has skin in the game. Remember how Nvidia used Cyberpunk to showcase ray tracing? The Witcher 4 is now Epic's poster child. If CDPR hits a roadblock, Epic will move mountains to fix it. Tim Sweeney himself has already acknowledged the backlash against Unreal 5's performance and promised better developer guidance to prevent issues. Witcher 4 is where Epic can prove it. There have also been smaller signs of progress. Late last year, actor Jake Lampert briefly listed Projekt Polaris on his resume, tied to a character named Bronco. That name doesn't appear in Sapkowski's books, so it seems CDPR is creating original characters. The listing was quickly scrubbed, usually a sign that it was accurate. Meanwhile, CDPR's financials tell the real story. Development costs have doubled year over year, aligning with Witcher 4 entering full production. Staffing has surged, spending is up, and momentum is clearly building. If you were wondering whether Witcher 4 is just crawling along in pre-production, the answer is no, they're all in. This suggests we'll likely see an official trailer next year. At minimum, Witcher 4 will continue showing up at Epic's showcases as development progresses. Based on everything so far, a 2027 release window seems most realistic. So they'll release it for the PlayStation 6 and whatever the next Xbox is called, and then they'll get to double dip on the platform sales that way with all sorts of optimizations and 8K resolutions on the next-gen hardware, stuff like that. And honestly, it's one of the things I'm most excited for in life and existence itself, is that it actually looks pretty likely that we will see Elder Scrolls 6 and The Witcher 4 go head-to-head. Like literally The Witcher 3 versus Fallout 4 all over again. Two massive RPGs from two legendary studios side by side. It'll be fascinating to compare them. Bethesda has its style of freedom and sandbox chaos, while CDPR leans on crafted storytelling and cinematic design. If they release within months of each other, we could see one of the biggest RPG showdowns in gaming history. So let me ask you, if Witcher 4 and Elder Scrolls 6 both launch in 2027, which one are you buying first? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm really curious where people stand on this. At the end of the day, here's what we know. CDPR has massively expanded their team, doubled their spending, and committed to avoiding the mistakes of Cyberpunk. They've simplified their pipeline by adopting Unreal, gained Epic as a powerful ally, and set performance expectations clearly from the start. Yes, skepticism is fair. Cyberpunk's launch hurt their reputation, and Unreal Engine 5 has a history of rough releases. But Phantom Liberty showed CDPR can recover, and Epic has every incentive to make Witcher 4 a success. If it all comes together, Witcher 4 won't just be CDPR's redemption, it could define RPGs for the next decade. So here's the big question. Do you trust CDPR to pull it off, or are you still burned from Cyberpunk's launch? Let me know your thoughts down below. And while you're at it, are you more hyped for Witcher 4 or Elder Scrolls 6? Because either way, the next few years of RPGs are going to be incredible. So this was pretty much everything we know about Witcher 4 now. If you enjoyed watching the contents on this channel, subscribe and hit the bell icon to make sure you stay updated on everything, and I will see you in the next one.